There are moments in life when you realize that the person you loved, the person you trusted with your deepest secrets and your most vulnerable moments, is actually capable of something so dark, so twisted, that it makes your blood run cold. This is the story of someone who learned that lesson the hardest way possible. A story about love that turned into obsession, passion that became possession, and a relationship that nearly cost an entire family their lives. Because when they finally found the courage to walk away, their ex didn't just threaten them. No, the words that came out of that person's mouth were far more chilling. If you leave me, I will end your entire family. Every single one of them. And I'll make sure you watch. Now, you might be thinking, come on, people say crazy things when they're hurt, when emotions are running high. And you'd be right to think that. Most of the time, these kinds of threats are just desperate attempts to regain control, empty words thrown out in anger. But this time was different. Because the look in those eyes when those words were spoken wasn't the look of someone who was just hurting. It was the look of someone who meant every single syllable. And our protagonist knew, in that bone-chilling moment, that their life and the lives of everyone they loved would never be the same again. But before we get to that terrifying moment, before we understand how things spiraled so completely out of control, we need to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to when everything seemed perfect, when love felt like magic, and when the warning signs that should have been glaring red flags were dismissed as quirks, as passion, as someone who just loved a little too intensely. See, that's the thing about abusive relationships. They don't start out that way. Nobody walks into a relationship knowing they're signing up for manipulation, control, and terror. It always begins with charm, with overwhelming affection, with someone who seems almost too good to be true. And in this case, that's exactly what it was. Too good to be true. They met at a mutual friend's birthday party in downtown Chicago on a Friday night in late September. The air had that perfect autumn crispness to it, and the city lights reflected off the buildings in a way that made everything feel cinematic, like something out of a movie. Our protagonist, let's call them Jordan, had just gotten out of a long-term relationship about 6 months prior and wasn't really looking for anything serious. They were there to have fun, to celebrate their friend turning 30, to maybe have a few drinks and forget about work stress for a night. That's when they saw them across the room. Dark hair, striking features, and a smile that could light up an entire building. When their eyes met, it was like one of those moments you read about in romance novels, but never actually believe happens in real life. There was an instant connection, an electric current that seemed to flow between them even from 20 feet away. The ex, we'll call them Casey, walked right over with a confidence that was both attractive and disarming. "I don't usually do this," Casey said with that magnetic smile, "but I saw you from across the room, and I knew if I didn't come talk to you, I'd regret it for the rest of my life." It was a line, sure, but it was delivered with such sincerity, such genuine warmth, that Jordan couldn't help but smile back. They talked for hours that night, standing in a corner of the party while the world seemed to fade away around them. Casey was charming, funny, attentive in a way that made Jordan feel like they were the only person who mattered in that entire room. They talked about childhood memories, about dreams and fears, about the kind of deep topics that usually take weeks or months to get to with someone new. "I feel like I've known you my whole life," Casey said at one point, looking into Jordan's eyes with an intensity that was both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. "Like we were meant to find each other." Red flag number 1. But Jordan didn't see it, because who doesn't want to feel special? Who doesn't want to believe in the kind of instant connection that movies and songs are made about? So instead of recognizing it as love bombing, as the first step in a carefully constructed trap, Jordan felt flattered, special, chosen. They exchanged numbers that night, and from that moment on, Casey became a constant presence in Jordan's life. Not in a gradual, natural way where two people slowly get to know each other, but in an immediate, all-consuming way that swept Jordan off their feet before they had time to think about what was happening. The texts started coming within minutes of Jordan getting home that night. "I can't stop thinking about you. I know this sounds crazy, but I think you might be the person I've been waiting for my whole life." The next morning, there were flowers delivered to Jordan's workplace, a massive bouquet of red roses with a card that read, "For the person who made me believe in fate. Can't wait to see you again." Jordan's coworkers crowded around, cooing over the romantic gesture, asking about this mystery person who had clearly made such a strong impression. Jordan felt their cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and pleasure. It felt good to be pursued like this, to be wanted so intensely after months of feeling lonely and disconnected. They went on their first official date that Saturday, just 5 days after meeting. Casey had planned everything meticulously. They went to an upscale Italian restaurant in the Gold Coast neighborhood, the kind of place where the waiters wear tuxedos and the wine list is longer than most novels. Casey had made reservations weeks in advance, they claimed, for a different occasion that no longer mattered because meeting you changed everything. "I canceled other plans to make sure this night was perfect," Casey explained, reaching across the table to take Jordan's hand. "Because I knew, from the moment I saw you, that you were going to be important to me. Really important." Jordan should have asked what plans were canceled, should have wondered why someone would completely rearrange their life after knowing someone for less than a week. But instead, they felt that warm glow of being valued, of being prioritized. It felt like being the center of someone's universe, and after months of feeling adrift, it was intoxicating. Over candlelight and expensive wine, Casey opened up about their past. A difficult childhood with parents who didn't understand them, a series of relationships that ended badly because people couldn't handle how much I love. A feeling of being alone in the world until now, until Jordan. "I know I'm coming on strong," Casey said, their thumb tracing circles on the back of Jordan's hand. "But I've learned that life is too short to play games. When you know, and I know." Jordan felt themselves falling, tumbling head first into something that felt like destiny. They talked until the restaurant staff started giving them pointed looks, clearly wanting to close for the night. When they finally left, Casey walked Jordan to their car, and under the glow of a streetlight, they shared their first kiss. It was soft and sweet, and felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Looking back now, Jordan can see all the warning signs that were there from the very beginning. The intensity, the immediate declarations of deep feeling, the way Casey seemed to have no other friends or family that they talked about, no life outside of this budding relationship. The way every conversation somehow circled back to them being soulmates, being meant for each other, being the only people who truly understood one another. But in the moment, it just felt like the kind of passionate, consuming love that people write songs about. It felt special. The first month was a whirlwind. Casey wanted to see Jordan every single day, and if they couldn't see each other in person, they were texting constantly, calling for hours, FaceTiming late into the night. Jordan's friends started commenting that they hadn't seen much of them lately, that they seemed completely absorbed in this new relationship. "Are you sure this is healthy?" Jordan's best friend Marcus asked over coffee one afternoon, one of the rare moments Jordan had managed to carve out for their existing friendships. "You guys have been dating for like 3 weeks, and you're already talking about moving in together? That seems really fast." Jordan had laughed it off. "When you know, they said, echoing Casey's words without even realizing it. "I've never felt this way about anyone before. It's different with Casey." Marcus had given them a look, a concerned furrow between his eyebrows that Jordan now wishes they'd paid more attention to. Just be careful, okay? I'm happy you're happy, but don't lose yourself in this relationship. You're still you, you know? You don't need to become part of a we and forget about being an I. It was good advice, the kind of wisdom that comes from a friend who's known you for years and can see when you're starting to drift away from your own identity. But Jordan didn't want to hear it. They were in love, or what they thought was love, and nothing else seemed to matter. By the second month, the cracks started to show. Small things at first, so subtle that Jordan almost didn't notice them. Casey started asking more questions about Jordan's day, wanting to know exactly where they'd been, who they'd talked to, what they'd discussed. At first, it seemed like genuine interest, like someone who cared deeply about every aspect of their partner's life. "Tell me everything," Casey would say with that charming smile. "I want to know every detail about your day. I want to feel like I was there with you." So Jordan would share about the meeting at work that ran long, about running into an old college friend at the grocery store, about the lunch break spent reading in the park. And Casey would listen intently, asking follow-up questions, seeming so invested in every mundane detail that it felt flattering. But then the questions started to change. They became more pointed, more suspicious. Who was at that meeting? Any men? Did anyone flirt with you? What college friend? Have you mentioned this person before? Were you ever involved with them? You spent an hour in the park alone? An entire hour? Did anyone approach you? Did you talk to anyone? The questions came wrapped in concern, in protectiveness, in what Casey framed as love. "I just care about you so much," they would explain, when Jordan looked confused by the interrogation. "The thought of someone else trying to take you away from me makes me crazy. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I can't lose you." And there it was again, that feeling of being valued, being treasured, being so important to someone that they couldn't bear the thought of losing you. It's a powerful drug, that feeling. It makes you overlook the fact that healthy love doesn't come with interrogations, that real affection doesn't require you to account for every minute of your day. Jordan started doing something they would later recognize as a major red flag in itself. They started editing their stories, leaving out details that they knew would trigger Casey's jealousy or suspicion. If a male coworker complimented their presentation, Jordan wouldn't mention it. If they ran into an ex at the coffee shop and exchanged brief pleasantries, that didn't make it into the daily recap. It seemed easier, less complicated, to just avoid the conversations that would lead to Casey spiraling into insecurity. But here's the thing about withholding information to keep the peace. It's exhausting. It requires you to constantly monitor your own life, to filter every experience through the lens of how your partner might react. And, more importantly, it's the first step toward losing yourself completely. 3 months in, Casey suggested they take a weekend trip together, a cabin in the woods upstate, away from the noise and stress of the city. Just the two of them, reconnecting with nature and each other. It sounded romantic, like exactly the kind of thing a couple in love should do. Jordan agreed immediately, excited for the chance to have uninterrupted time together, without the distractions of work and daily life. They drove up on a Friday afternoon, Casey behind the wheel of their black SUV, music playing softly as they wound through increasingly rural roads. The cabin was beautiful, tucked away in a forest of pine trees, with a stone fireplace and huge windows that looked out onto a pristine lake. It should have been perfect. The first sign that something was wrong came when Jordan pulled out their phone to take a picture of the sunset over the water. Casey's hand shot out, grabbing Jordan's wrist with surprising force. "What are you doing?" The tone was sharp, accusatory. Jordan looked at Casey in confusion, then down at their wrist where Casey's fingers were wrapped tight enough to leave marks. "I was just going to take a picture," The sunset is beautiful. Were you going to post it? Were you going to let everyone know where we are? Were you going to invite other people into our private moment? The questions came rapid fire, Casey's eyes intense in a way that made Jordan's stomach drop. This wasn't the playful, charming person they'd fallen for. This was someone else entirely. Someone whose mask was starting to slip. "I wasn't going to post it," Jordan said carefully, suddenly very aware that they were miles from anywhere, that they'd told friends they'd be off the grid for the weekend, that no one knew exactly where they were. "I just wanted to capture the moment. For us." Casey's expression shifted so quickly it was like watching someone flip a switch. The intensity melted away, replaced by that familiar, warm smile, and they released Jordan's wrist, instead gently taking the phone and setting it aside. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to snap. It's just that I want this weekend to be about us, you know? No phones, no social media, no outside world. Just you and me, the way it's supposed to be. Can we do that? Can we just exist in our own little bubble for 2 days?" When Casey put it that way, it sounded reasonable, romantic even. Couples did that all the time, digital detoxes to reconnect with each other. Jordan nodded, pushing down the unease that was crawling up their spine, telling themselves they were overreacting. But that weekend, isolated in that beautiful cabin, Jordan saw glimpses of the real Casey, the person behind the charm, behind the declarations of eternal love, behind the carefully constructed facade. When dinner didn't turn out perfectly, Casey went from cheerful to furious in seconds, throwing the pan against the wall and then immediately apologizing, saying the stress of wanting everything to be perfect had gotten to them. When Jordan suggested they go for a hike the next morning, Casey accused them of being bored, of not wanting to spend time together, of probably hoping to meet some attractive stranger on the trails. And then came the moment that should have been the wake-up call, the moment that Jordan should have recognized as the point of no return. They were sitting on the dock Sunday morning, feet dangling in the cold lake water, when Casey said something that made Jordan's blood freeze. "You know I would die without you, right? Like, literally. I don't think I could go on living if you ever left me. You're my whole world, Jordan. My entire reason for existing. Promise me you'll never leave. Promise me we'll be together forever." The words were delivered with such intensity, such desperate need, that Jordan felt trapped. Because what do you say to that? How do you respond when someone hands you the weight of their entire existence and asks you to carry it? "Casey, that's a lot of pressure to put on someone," Jordan said carefully, trying to keep their voice gentle. "I care about you so much, but you can't make me responsible for your entire happiness. That's not healthy for either of us." The change was instantaneous. Casey's face contorted with rage, their hands gripping Jordan's shoulders hard enough to bruise. "Not healthy? You think loving someone with your whole heart is not healthy? You think I'm crazy for needing you? Maybe you don't actually love me. Maybe you've been lying this whole time. Maybe you're just like everyone else who's abandoned me." Jordan tried to pull away, but Casey's grip tightened. "You're hurting me," they said, voice shaking now with real fear. And just like that, Casey released them, tears instantly streaming down their face, apologies tumbling out in a rush. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Please don't be scared of me. I love you so much it makes me crazy sometimes. I would never hurt you. You know that, right? I would cut off my own hand before I hurt you. Please forgive me, please." Jordan did forgive them, because that's what you do when you're in deep, when you've invested months of your life, when you want to believe that the person you fell for is the real them, and these frightening moments are just aberrations, just signs that they need help, that your love can fix them. They drove back to Chicago in tense silence, Casey occasionally reaching over to squeeze Jordan's hand, to apologize again, to promise it would never happen like that again. And Jordan wanted desperately to believe it. But things didn't get better. they got worse. Much worse. Over the next few weeks, Casey's controlling behavior escalated in ways that Jordan could no longer rationalize or excuse. It started with passwords. Casey wanted access to Jordan's phone, their social media accounts, their email. Couples who have nothing to hide share everything, Casey explained. If we're going to build a life together, we need complete transparency. Unless you're hiding something from me? The question was posed as innocent curiosity, but there was a threat underneath it. An implication that refusing meant Jordan was being deceptive, was betraying the relationship. So Jordan handed over their passwords, telling themselves it was fine, that they had nothing to hide anyway. Within days, Casey was monitoring everything. Every text message was read and analyzed. Every social media interaction was questioned. Jordan's coworker posted a funny comment on one of their pictures. "Why is he commenting on your photos? Does he have feelings for you? Did you encourage this?" An old friend from high school sent a message saying they'd be in town and wanted to grab coffee. Why does this person want to see you alone? What's the real reason? Are you planning to meet up with an ex? Jordan found themselves explaining and defending innocent interactions, their life becoming a constant performance where every action had to be justified, every relationship had to be defended. Friends started dropping off because Casey made it so difficult to maintain any connection outside the relationship. Plans were canceled last minute because Casey would have a crisis that required Jordan's immediate presence. Phone calls with family became interrogations afterward about what was discussed, whether Jordan had complained about the relationship, whether they were trying to turn people against Casey. Marcus tried to reach out one more time, calling Jordan on a Tuesday evening when Casey was supposedly working late. "Hey, I haven't heard from you in weeks. Are you okay? Because from the outside, this relationship looks really unhealthy, and I'm worried about you." Jordan felt tears prick their eyes, the concern in their friend's voice almost breaking through the careful walls they'd built to protect Casey, to protect the relationship, to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. "I'm okay," Jordan lied. "Things are just intense right now, but we're working through it. Casey's been under a lot of stress, and I just need to be supportive." "Jordan, listen to me. Stress doesn't make someone controlling. Stress doesn't make someone isolate their partner from friends and family. Those are choices. Those are red flags. And I'm really worried that you're in over your head here." Before Jordan could respond, they heard the sound of keys in the door. Casey was home early. Panic flooded through them as they realized they were on the phone, talking to someone Casey had explicitly said they shouldn't trust, someone Casey had called a bad influence and jealous of our happiness. "I have to go," Jordan whispered urgently into the phone. "Jordan, wait!" They hung up just as Casey walked into the room. For a second, they considered lying, saying it was a work call or a telemarketer. But Casey had that look, that knowing expression that said they already knew the truth, that the trap was already set. "Who was that?" Casey's voice was calm, which was somehow more terrifying than if they'd been yelling. "It was Marcus. He was just checking in." "Marcus." Casey said the name like it tasted bitter. "The friend who's been trying to turn you against me since day one. The one who can't stand to see you happy. And you've been talking to him behind my back." "It wasn't behind your back. He called me, and he's my friend, Casey. I'm allowed to have friends." The words came out with more force than Jordan intended, a spark of the person they used to be before this relationship consumed them. And Casey clearly didn't like it. "Allowed? You think you need my permission? I'm not controlling you, Jordan. I'm protecting you, protecting us. Because people like Marcus don't want you to be happy. They want you to fail. They want this relationship to end so they can swoop in and feel important. And the fact that you can't see that, the fact that you're defending him right now, tells me everything I need to know about where your loyalty lies." What happened next was a 4-hour argument that felt more like psychological warfare. Casey went through every interaction Jordan had with Marcus over the past few years, reframing innocent moments as evidence of inappropriate attachment, of emotional betrayal. They cried, they raged, they threatened to leave, and then they collapsed in Jordan's arms, begging them not to abandon them like everyone else had. By the time it was over, Jordan was exhausted, emotionally drained, and somehow convinced that maintaining the friendship with Marcus was selfish, was damaging to the relationship, was something they needed to sacrifice for the greater good of their partnership with Casey. They sent Marcus a text that night, short and final. "I need some space. Please don't contact me for a while." Marcus responded immediately. "This isn't you. This is them controlling you. When you're ready to get out, I'll be here. Always." Jordan deleted the message before Casey could see it, but the words haunted them. Because somewhere, deep down, underneath all the justifications and rationalizations, Jordan knew Marcus was right. They knew they were being controlled. They knew they were losing themselves. But knowing something and having the strength to act on that knowledge are two very different things. The isolation became total. Jordan's world shrank until it consisted of work, home, and Casey. Every other relationship fell away, not through Jordan's choice, but through Casey's careful manipulation. Family dinners were missed because Casey scheduled things at the same time and made Jordan choose. Friends stopped inviting them to events after being ignored or canceled on repeatedly. Jordan's sister tried to express concern and was met with Casey's fury, resulting in a rift that broke Jordan's heart, but seemed unavoidable given how Casey framed it as choosing between toxic family and our future together. Work became the only space where Jordan had any autonomy, and even that was increasingly invaded. Casey would show up unannounced at lunch, always with some excuse about being in the neighborhood, always with that charming smile for Jordan's coworkers, while privately interrogating Jordan about who they'd eaten lunch with, who they'd talked to, whether anyone had been inappropriate. Jordan's boss, a perceptive woman named Sandra, who'd been managing people for 20 years, pulled them aside one day after one of Casey's surprise visits. "Is everything okay at home?" she asked gently, closing her office door to give them privacy. "I don't want to overstep, but I've noticed some changes in you over the past few months. You seem anxious, distracted, and your partner? They seem very present in your work life." Jordan felt defensive walls go up immediately, that trained response to protect Casey, to protect the relationship from outside judgment. "Everything's fine. Casey's just thoughtful, likes to check in on me during the day." Sandra looked at them for a long moment, and Jordan could see she didn't believe it. "Okay, but I want you to know that if you ever need help, resources, or just someone to talk to, my door is always open. No judgment, just support." The kindness in her voice almost broke Jordan. They nodded quickly, mumbling thanks, and fled back to their desks before the tears could fall. Because accepting help would mean admitting that something was wrong. And admitting something was wrong would mean facing the terrifying reality of how trapped they'd become. That night, Casey asked about the conversation with Sandra, because of course they'd been watching through the office windows. Of course they'd seen Jordan go into the boss's office. Of course they needed to know every word that was spoken. Jordan tried to downplay it, but Casey's suspicion was already activated. "Did you tell her about us? Did you make me sound like some kind of villain? Are you trying to turn your workplace against me?" "No! God, Casey, she was just checking in. That's what good managers do. It wasn't about you." "Everything is about me. I'm your partner. When your boss asks if things are okay at home, she's asking about me. She's judging our relationship. She's probably telling you to leave me, isn't she? They're all against us, Jordan. Everyone wants to see us fail." The paranoia in Casey's voice was palpable, and Jordan felt that familiar exhaustion settle over them. There was no winning these arguments. No explanation that would satisfy. No way to prove their loyalty that would ever be enough. That was the night Jordan first thought seriously about leaving. Really leaving. Not just fantasizing about it in weak moments, but actually planning an escape. They waited until Casey fell asleep, then quietly retrieved their laptop and started searching. How to leave a controlling relationship. Signs of emotional abuse. Domestic violence resources. What they read made their hands shake. Every article could have been written specifically about their situation. The isolation, the monitoring, the jealousy, the way Casey made them feel responsible for Casey's emotional state, the escalating anger, the cycle of explosion and apology. It wasn't love. It had never been love. It was control. It was possession. It was abuse. Jordan spent that night reading survivor stories, crying silently so they wouldn't wake Casey, and realizing with horrible clarity that they were in danger. Real danger. Because every resource site said the same thing. The most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when the victim tries to leave. That's when control turns to violence. That's when threats become actions. That's when people get hurt. But staying wasn't an option anymore. Jordan could feel themselves disappearing, their personality eroding under the constant pressure to be who Casey needed them to be. If they didn't leave now, they feared there would be nothing left of them to save. The planning had to be careful, methodical. Casey monitored everything, so Jordan couldn't search for apartments or look at resources from their phone or home computer. They started using their lunch breaks to sit in the public library, using their computers to research, to plan, to reach back out to the people they'd been forced to cut off. They sent Marcus an email from a new account Casey didn't know about. "You were right. I need help getting out. Can we meet?" Marcus's response came within minutes. "Thank God. Yes. Anywhere, anytime. I've been so worried about you." They met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood where Casey would never think to look for them, and Jordan told their friend everything. The control, the isolation, the rage, the fear. And Marcus listened without judgment, without "I told you so," just with genuine concern and a plan to help. "You can't do this alone," Marcus said firmly. "People like Casey don't just let you walk away. You need support, you need a safety plan, and you need to be somewhere they can't get to you when you tell them it's over." Jordan knew he was right, which is why they made the hardest phone call they'd made in months. They called their father. Jordan's dad lived about an hour outside the city in a modest house where Jordan had grown up, where their two older brothers also currently lived. The family was tight-knit, or had been before Casey systematically drove wedges between them. Jordan's father answered on the second ring, and the sound of his voice made Jordan start crying before they could even explain why they were calling. "Dad, I need help. I need to come home, and I need to tell you something that I should have told you a long time ago." There was no hesitation on the other end. "Whatever you need, kiddo. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. Come home." That conversation was the beginning of the end. Jordan spent the next week carefully preparing, moving important documents to Marcus's apartment for safekeeping, opening a new bank account that Casey didn't have access to, quietly packing a bag that they hid in the trunk of their car. They told Casey they were working late more often, using the time to set up the pieces of their escape. Casey sensed something was wrong. They always did. The monitoring intensified, the questions became more accusatory, the mood swings more violent. Casey punched a hole in the wall during one argument, inches from Jordan's head, and then crumbled into sobs, swearing it would never happen again, begging Jordan not to be scared of them. But Jordan was scared, terrified, because they could feel Casey's control slipping, could sense the desperation underneath the rage, and they knew that time was running out. They had to leave soon, before Casey's intuition about what was happening became concrete knowledge. The night Jordan chose to end it was a Friday. They'd arranged it so their dad and brothers would be at the house, so Marcus knew to expect a call, so they had a bag packed and ready in their car. Casey came home from work in a good mood, which somehow made it harder. They'd picked up Thai food, Jordan's favorite, and suggested they have a quiet night in, maybe watch a movie, just be together. Jordan looked at this person who'd consumed their life for the past 7 months and felt a confusing mix of emotions. Anger, yes. Fear, absolutely. But also sadness. Because underneath the monster Casey had become, there were glimpses of the person Jordan had fallen for. The charming date who'd made them feel special. The partner who'd seemed so devoted. That person was either never real or was so deeply buried under mental illness and control issues that they'd probably never emerge again. "Casey, we need to talk," Jordan said, their voice steadier than they felt. The mood shifted immediately. Casey set down the food, their expression closing off. "What's wrong? What did I do now? I can't do anything right, can I?" "This isn't working. Us. This relationship. It's not healthy. And I think we both know that deep down. We've tried, but I can't do this anymore. I think we need to end this." The words hung in the air like smoke, and Jordan watched Casey's face go through a rapid series of emotions. Shock, disbelief, hurt, and then something darker. Something that made Jordan's instincts scream danger. "You can't be serious." Casey's voice was quiet, measured, which was somehow more frightening than yelling. "After everything we've been through, after all the plans we made, you're just going to throw that away?" "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing to be healthy. And I hope you'll do the same. Get some help. Work on yourself. But I can't be part of that process. I'm done." Casey stood up slowly, and Jordan felt every muscle in their body tense. "You're done. You're done. Just like that, you've decided for both of us that this relationship is over. Without even trying to work on it. Without giving me a chance to fix things. We've been trying to fix things for months, Casey. This is who we are together. This is the relationship. Fighting, controlling, apologizing, repeating. I don't want to live like this anymore." "So you're leaving me?" The words were stated as fact now, and Casey's hands were clenching and unclenching at their sides. "You're abandoning me like everyone else, after I gave you everything, after I loved you more than anyone has ever loved you. You're just going to walk out." Jordan grabbed their keys from the table, their phone from the counter. "I'm going to stay with my dad for a while. I'll come back for my things next week when you're at work. We can figure out the lease and everything else later, but right now, I just need space." They started moving toward the door, and Casey moved too, faster than Jordan expected, positioning themselves between Jordan and the exit. "You're not leaving." The voice was different now, cold and flat in a way that made Jordan's blood run cold. "You think you can just walk out of here? You think I'm going to let you destroy my life and just walk away?" "Move, Casey. I don't want to make this ugly, but I'm leaving. Tonight. Now. If you walk out that door, you'll regret it. I promise you that. You think you can just abandon me and there won't be consequences?" Jordan's heart was pounding so hard they could hear it in their ears. "Are you threatening me right now?" Casey smiled, and it was the most chilling thing Jordan had ever seen. "I'm not threatening you, baby. I'm threatening them. Your precious family, your father and those stupid brothers you're so close to. You walk out that door, and I will make sure every single one of them pays for what you're doing to me." The words seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Jordan stared at Casey, trying to process what they'd just heard, trying to believe this was still just desperate talk, empty threats from someone who was hurting. "You don't mean that." Don't I? Casey pulled out their phone, scrolling to show Jordan pictures. Pictures of Jordan's father's house. Pictures of their brother's cars. Pictures taken from across the street, from the end of the driveway, clear evidence that Casey had been stalking them. I know where they live. I know their schedules. I know where your dad gets his coffee every morning. I know which bar your brothers go to on Thursday nights. I know everything, Jordan. And if you leave me, if you break my heart like this, I will end them. Every single one. And I'll make sure you watch before I end you too. The conviction in Casey's voice, the dead certainty in their eyes, told Jordan this wasn't a bluff. This wasn't hyperbole. Casey had been planning this, preparing for the possibility that Jordan might try to leave, gathering intelligence like some kind of military operation. The person standing in front of them wasn't the charming date from months ago, wasn't even the controlling partner they'd been living with. This was someone whose grip on reality had completely shattered, someone who'd decided that if they couldn't have Jordan, then no one could. Especially not the family members who'd tried to warn Jordan, who'd tried to protect them. Jordan felt paralyzed, their mind racing through options. They could try to push past Casey to the door, but that might trigger violence. They could call the police, but Casey was between them and the exit, and who knew what they might do if Jordan pulled out their phone. They could try to de-escalate, to calm Casey down, but what did that mean? Staying? Pretending everything was okay? Giving up their escape plan? Casey, you need help. This isn't rational. You're not thinking clearly. Please, just let me leave and we can... We can what? Casey's composure shattered, and they grabbed Jordan's shoulders, shaking them. We can talk about it later? We can be friends? You can leave me destroyed while you go back to your perfect little family? No, that's not how this works. You made me love you. You made me need you. And now you want to just take that away? You've ruined me, Jordan. So if I'm ruined, everyone else gets to be ruined too. Jordan wrenched themselves free from Casey's grip and made a decision. They couldn't reason with someone this far gone, couldn't negotiate with someone making threats against their family. They had to get out, now, and worry about the consequences later. They shoved Casey hard, using the element of surprise to create enough space to bolt for the door. Casey recovered quickly, lunging after them, grabbing at Jordan's jacket. Jordan felt the fabric tear as they yanked free, their fingers finding the doorknob, turning it, pulling the door open. Casey's hand slammed into the door above Jordan's head, trying to force it closed, but Jordan was already halfway through, already running down the hallway of their apartment building toward the stairs. Behind them, they could hear Casey screaming, words that echoed off the walls. You'll regret this. They'll all pay for this. You can't hide from me. I'll find you. I'll find them. Jordan didn't stop running until they reached their car, hands shaking so badly they could barely get the key in the ignition. They locked the doors and peeled out of the parking lot, checking the rearview mirror constantly to make sure Casey wasn't following. Their phones started ringing immediately, Casey's name flashing on the screen. They ignored it. It rang again, and again, and again. The texts started coming rapid fire. How could you do this to me? I gave you everything. You're going to be sorry. Your family is dead. Do you hear me? Dead. I'm going to make you watch while I kill your father first. Your brothers won't know what hit them. This is your fault, remember that. Their blood is on your hands. Jordan pulled over on the side of the highway, shaking so hard they couldn't safely drive. They called their father, the phone ringing once before he picked up. Dad, Casey's threatening to kill you, all of you. We need to call the police. I'm coming home right now, but please, lock all the doors. Don't answer if Casey shows up. They've completely lost it. They have pictures of the house. They've been watching you. I'm so sorry. I never thought... Slow down, kiddo. Breathe. You're okay. You got out. That's what matters. Come home. Your brothers and I will be ready if anyone tries anything. But you just focus on getting here safely. Don't speed. Don't panic. Just drive careful and come home. The calm in their father's voice helped Jordan find their center. They took a few deep breaths, checked their mirrors, and pulled back onto the highway. The 30-minute drive to their dad's house felt like hours, every set of headlights behind them looking like Casey's car, every dark stretch of road feeling like a trap. When they finally pulled into the familiar driveway of their childhood home, the porch light was on and their father was standing in the doorway. Jordan practically fell out of the car and into their dad's arms, finally allowing themselves to break down, to sob out all the fear and stress and trauma of the past months. "I've got you," their father said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now. We've got you." Jordan's brothers, Marcus and David, appeared behind their father, and Jordan had never been more grateful for their family's close bond. Marcus was the oldest at 32, a former Marine who'd done 2 tours overseas and now worked construction. David was 28, a software engineer with a dry sense of humor and a fierce protective streak. Both of them looked furious as Jordan explained what had happened, showing them the threatening texts that were still coming through every few minutes. "This psycho is threatening our family?" Marcus said, his jaw tight. "We need to call the cops right now. This is terrorism, straight up." Their father nodded. "Already got the phone in my hand. But first, let's screenshot all those messages. We need evidence." They spent the next hour documenting everything. The controlling behavior over the past months, the escalation, the stalking photos Casey had taken of the house, the explicit threats. When the police arrived, Jordan walked them through the entire relationship, their voice growing stronger as they recounted details they'd never said out loud before. Hearing themselves describe it to strangers made the abuse undeniable, made it impossible to minimize or excuse. The officers took the report seriously, especially given the specific nature of the threats and the photographic evidence of Casey stalking the family. They explained the process for getting a restraining order, encouraged Jordan to stay somewhere Casey wouldn't look for them, and said they'd do a drive-by of the house a few times that night to ensure everyone's safety. After the police left, Jordan's family gathered in the living room. Their father made tea, a comfort ritual from Jordan's childhood, and they all sat in the familiar space where Jordan had grown up. David had retrieved Jordan's emergency bag from their car, and Marcus had gone around checking all the locks on the doors and windows. "I'm sorry," Jordan said quietly, hands wrapped around the warm mug. "I brought this to your doorstep. Casey's insane, and I should have seen it sooner, should have left sooner. Now you're all in danger because of my poor choices." "Stop that right now," their father said firmly. "You are not responsible for someone else's mental illness. You are not to blame for being manipulated by someone who clearly has serious problems. What you did was brave. You recognized the situation was dangerous, and you got out. That takes incredible strength." Marcus leaned forward. "And we're your family. This is what family does. We protect each other. Some psycho wants to threaten us? Let them try. David and I both have our AKs. Dad's got his shotgun. This house is basically a fortress. And more importantly, we've got each other's backs." Casey picked the wrong family to mess with. David nodded in agreement. "Besides, these types are usually all talk. They make big threats to scare you, to maintain control. But when they're actually confronted, when they realize they're not dealing with an isolated victim anymore, they usually back down." Jordan wanted to believe that, wanted to think Casey's threats were just desperate attempts at manipulation, that they'd calm down after a few days and accept the breakup. But the look in Casey's eyes, the dead certainty in their voice when they described how they'd end Jordan's family, had been too real, too specific. "I don't think Casey's bluffing," Jordan said quietly. "I think they actually mean it. We need to take this seriously." Their father reached over and squeezed Jordan's hand. "We are taking it seriously. That's why we called the police. That's why we're documenting everything. That's why you're staying here where you're not alone. We're not underestimating this person, but we're also not going to live in fear. We'll be careful. We'll be prepared. But we won't let some abuser dictate how we live our lives." That night, Jordan barely slept. They lay in their childhood bedroom, surrounded by remnants of the person they used to be before Casey, and listened to every sound in the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old heating system, every rustle of wind against the windows had them tensing, wondering if Casey had found them, if the threats were about to become reality. Their phone continued to buzz with messages throughout the night. Casey alternated between rage and desperate pleading. "I didn't mean what I said. I was just hurt. Please come back and we can work this out." "You've destroyed me. I hope you're happy. I hope you enjoy knowing you killed the person who loved you most. Last chance. Come back or everyone pays. I'm outside your dad's house right now. Should I knock? Or should I just come in?" That last message made Jordan's heart stop. They crept to the window, careful not to be seen, and looked out at the quiet street. There was no one there. No cars that didn't belong, no figures lurking in the shadows. But Casey knew they'd gotten the message, knew Jordan would look, knew they'd managed to make Jordan feel unsafe even in their childhood home. Jordan went downstairs and found Marcus already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a clear view of the front door. His AK-47 was broken down on the table in front of him, and he was methodically cleaning it, the familiar ritual of someone who'd spent years in the military. "Couldn't sleep either?" Marcus said without looking up. Casey sent a message saying they're outside. "I looked but didn't see anyone." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I've been checking every 10 minutes or so. Street's empty. They're just trying to fuck with your head, make you paranoid. Classic abuser tactic. Don't let them get in your head." Jordan sat down across from their brother, watching his practiced movements as he reassembled the weapon. "When did our family become the kind of people who need to sleep with guns within reach?" "The moment some psycho threatened us," Marcus said simply. "Look, I've seen some bad stuff overseas. People who are genuinely dangerous versus people who just talk big. Your ex might be dangerous, or they might be all bark. But until we know which one, we prepare for the worst and hope for the best." "I never wanted this life," Jordan said, voice cracking. "I just wanted to fall in love, to have a normal relationship. How did it turn into this nightmare?" Marcus finally looked up, his expression softening. "Because some people are broken in ways we can't fix. It's not your fault that Casey's wires are crossed, that they don't know how to love someone without consumers them. All you can do is protect yourself and move forward, and trust that your family's got your back while you heal." The days that followed were tense. Jordan took time off work, not feeling safe going to their normal routine when Casey knew their schedule. They filed for a restraining order, which was granted based on the threatening messages and the stalking photos. Casey was served with the order at their workplace, and according to the sheriff who delivered it, they'd remained eerily calm, simply nodded, and went back to work. That calm was more disturbing than rage would have been. It suggested planning, calculation, someone who was biding their time rather than acting impulsively. For 3 days there was nothing. No messages, no calls, no sightings. The silence was almost worse than the bombardment of contact had been, because it felt like the pause before a storm. Jordan's family remained vigilant, but the lack of activity made it hard to maintain the high level of alertness. Human nature wants to relax, to believe the danger has passed. On the 4th night, at around 2 a.m, the doorbell rang. Jordan jolted awake at the sound, heart instantly racing. They heard movement in the house, their father and brothers clearly also awakened. Jordan crept to their bedroom door and opened it slightly, listening. The doorbell rang again, and again, insistent, demanding. Jordan heard their father's voice, low and calm. "Boys, grab your weapons. Jordan, stay in your room." But Jordan couldn't stay in their room, couldn't hide while their family faced potential danger because of them. They moved to the top of the stairs, where they could see down into the entryway, could see Marcus and David taking positions on either side of the door, both holding their AKs in a ready position that spoke of military training. Their father moved to the door's peephole, looked through, and his expression hardened. "It's them," he said quietly. The doorbell rang again, and then Casey's voice came through the door, muffled but audible. "I know you're all in there. I just want to talk to Jordan. Just 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. 5 minutes, and then I'll leave." Jordan's father's voice was steady and firm when he responded, not opening the door. "There's a restraining order. You're not supposed to be here. You need to leave now, or we're calling the police." "A restraining order?" Casey's voice rose, taking on a hysterical edge. "A piece of paper! Like that's gonna keep me from the person I love. Jordan, I know you can hear me. Please, baby, just come talk to me. I'm sorry for everything. I'll get help. I'll change. Just don't throw away everything we had." Jordan felt tears streaming down their face, a confusing mix of emotions swirling through them. Part of them wanted to believe Casey could change, wanted this nightmare to end peacefully. But a stronger part, the part that had finally woken up to reality, knew that going out there would be a terrible mistake. "Jordan's not coming out," their father said, "and you need to leave, now. I've got my phone in my hand, and I'm calling 911 if you're not gone in 30 seconds. There was a long pause, and Jordan could practically feel Casey's energy through the door, that volatile mix of desperation and rage that had become so familiar over the past months. "You all turned my Jordan against me," Casey said, and the voice was different now, colder. His father, who thinks he knows everything. His brothers, who are probably filling his head with lies right now. "You're the problem, not me. We were perfect until you all got involved, and if I can't have Jordan, I'll make sure you pay for destroying what we had." "That's a threat," Marcus called out, his voice hard. "And we've got witnesses. You're making this worse for yourself." Through the peephole, Jordan's father watched as Casey pulled something from their jacket. For a horrible moment, Jordan thought it was a gun. They could see their father tense and their brothers adjust their grip on their weapons. But it was a knife, a large hunting knife that Casey held up to the peephole so they could all see it clearly. "I came prepared to do what needs to be done," Casey said, and the calmness in their voice was more terrifying than any scream. "Jordan, if you don't come out here right now, I'm going to start with your father, then your brothers, and I'll save you for last so you can watch. This is your choice. You can save them by just talking to me. 5 minutes. That's all." Jordan started moving down the stairs before they'd even made a conscious decision, but Marcus was faster, turning and pointing his weapon toward the stairs in a clear message to stop. "Don't you dare," Marcus said to Jordan. "That's what they want, to isolate you, to get you outside where there's no witnesses. You open that door, you might not come back through it." Their father was already on the phone with 911, giving the address, explaining the situation, emphasizing the weapons and the threats and the restraining order. But police response time would be at least 5 to 10 minutes, and Casey was right outside with a knife and clearly deteriorating mental stability. "I'm coming in," Casey announced. "Since Jordan won't come out, I'll come in there, and we'll settle this as a family." They heard Casey back up, heard the thud of shoulder against door as Casey tried to force entry. The door was solid, old oak that had been there since the house was built in the 70s, and it held. But Casey tried again, and again, the impacts shaking the frame. "When they break that door down," David said quietly, "we're going to have a situation. And I want to be clear about rules of engagement here." Their father looked at his sons, at the weapons they held, at Jordan frozen on the stairs. "If that door opens and they come in with that knife, you protect your sibling, whatever it takes. I'll deal with the legal fallout. Family first." Jordan felt sick. This was really happening. Casey was really trying to break into their father's house. Their family was really preparing to use lethal force if necessary. All because Jordan had tried to leave an unhealthy relationship. The absurdity and horror of it all crashed over them in waves. Outside, Casey's attempts at breaking down the door stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse. They could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer, and Jordan prayed that Casey would run, would give up, would do anything other than escalate further. But Casey didn't run. Instead, they moved to the front window, the big picture window that looked into the living room. The curtains were drawn, but not completely, leaving a gap. Jordan saw Casey's face appear in that gap, illuminated by the porch light, and the expression there would haunt their dreams for years to come. It was a mixture of love and hate, devotion and fury, sanity and complete psychotic break. "I see you, Jordan," Casey said, their voice carrying through the glass. "Standing there on the stairs, letting your family protect you. When are you going to be brave enough to face me yourself? When are you going to woman up and admit that you're just as responsible for this as I am?" The sirens were very close now, and blue and red lights began flashing through the windows. Casey looked toward the street, then back at the house, and made a decision. Instead of running, they pulled back and hurled themselves at the window. The glass shattered in an explosion of sound, and suddenly Casey was halfway through, bloody from the broken glass, still holding that knife, eyes locked on Jordan with terrible intensity. Everything happened very fast after that. Marcus and David both shouted warnings, their weapons coming up to firing position. Their father moved between Casey and the stairs where Jordan stood frozen, and Casey, bleeding and wild-eyed, managed to get fully through the window and took 2 steps into the living room before Marcus fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, and it stopped Casey in their tracks. Police were pounding on the door now, shouting that they were entering. The front door burst open, and suddenly the small entryway was full of officers with weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Drop the knife! Hands in the air! Get on the ground!" For a long moment, Casey stood there, surrounded by armed police officers and Jordan's equally armed family, and seemed to be considering their options. Jordan could see the calculation happening, could see Casey trying to determine if they could still reach their target, could still make good on their threats. "Don't," Jordan said, their voice cutting through the chaos. "Casey, please, don't make them shoot you. Just drop the knife. This is over." Casey's eyes met Jordan's one last time, and in that gaze, Jordan saw the moment when the person they'd loved, or thought they'd loved, finally died. What remained was just pain and rage and broken pieces that no one could put back together. The knife clattered to the floor. Casey collapsed to their knees, hands going up in surrender. Officers moved in immediately, cuffing them and beginning to read their rights, while others moved through the house, checking everyone for injuries, securing the scene. Jordan sat down hard on the stairs, their legs no longer able to support them. It was over. Finally, terrifyingly, devastatingly over. Casey was being led out in handcuffs, still trying to turn back toward Jordan, still calling out that they loved them, that this was all a misunderstanding, that they could work it out if everyone would just calm down. The neighbors had come out, drawn by the commotion, standing on their lawns in robes and watching the scene unfold. Police were taking statements from Jordan's father and brothers. EMTs had arrived to check everyone over, particularly Casey, who was bleeding from multiple cuts from the broken window. The quiet residential street had turned into a crime scene, all because someone couldn't accept that a relationship was over. A female detective came to sit next to Jordan on the stairs. She introduced herself as Detective Rodriguez, and her voice was gentle when she asked if Jordan was okay to answer some questions. Jordan nodded numbly and began recounting the evening's events, their voice sounding distant and disconnected even to their own ears. "You did the right thing," Detective Rodriguez said when Jordan finished. "Getting out when you did, documenting everything, calling for help. I know this is traumatic, but it could have been so much worse. Your ex is clearly having a mental health crisis, and now they'll get evaluated and hopefully get the help they need while facing the legal consequences of their actions." "What's going to happen to them?" Jordan asked. Given the restraining order violation, the attempted breaking and entering, the assault with a deadly weapon, and the threats, they're looking at serious charges. Could be years in prison, depending on how the prosecutor's office handles it. But that's not your responsibility. Your only job now is to heal. The sun was coming up by the time all the statements were taken and the last police car pulled away. Casey had been transported to the hospital for treatment of their injuries and then would be moved to jail pending arraignment. Jordan's family sat in the living room, surrounded by the evidence of the night's violence. The shattered window, already boarded up by Marcus, the bullet hole in the ceiling, the bloodstains on the floor. "We need to call a trauma cleanup crew," their father said practically, "and a glass repair company. But first, I think we all need some sleep. It's been a hell of a night." But none of them slept. They sat together as the morning light filtered through the boarded window, processing what had happened, grateful that it hadn't ended worse. Jordan's phone buzzed with messages from friends and coworkers who'd somehow already heard what happened, offering support and concern. The story would be all over social media soon, Jordan knew. The crazy ex who tried to attack their former partner's family. It would become a cautionary tale, a story people shared as an example of how bad things can get. In the days that followed, Jordan had to relive the trauma repeatedly. At the courthouse for the restraining order hearing, at the prosecutor's office when they decided to charge Casey with multiple felonies, at the preliminary hearing where Casey appeared via video link, looking medicated and distant, barely resembling the vibrant person Jordan had first met. Casey's family reached out through their lawyer, apologizing for their child's behavior, explaining that Casey had been diagnosed years ago with borderline personality disorder and had stopped taking medication months before meeting Jordan. They'd been concerned about Casey's escalating behavior, but hadn't known about the relationship or the threats until the arrest. In hindsight, Jordan could see how Casey had isolated them, not just from Jordan's support system, but from their own, carefully hiding the relationship from anyone who might recognize the warning signs and intervene. The psychiatric evaluation ordered by the court revealed a complex picture. Casey wasn't a monster. They were someone deeply mentally ill whose condition had been left untreated and had spiraled completely out of control. The obsessive love, the paranoia, the inability to regulate emotions, all symptoms of untreated borderline personality disorder combined with possible psychotic features. Jordan found themselves in a strange position. They were angry, traumatized, and terrified of what Casey had done and tried to do, but they also felt a deep sadness for the broken person Casey was, for the life they could have had if they'd gotten help, for the relationship that might have been possible in an alternate universe where mental illness didn't twist love into possession. Their therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in trauma from intimate partner violence, helped Jordan process the complex emotions. It's possible to acknowledge someone's mental illness while still holding them accountable for their actions, Dr. Chen explained. Casey made choices. They chose to stop taking medication. They chose to pursue a relationship while unstable. They chose to control rather than communicate. Mental illness explains behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. The trial happened 6 months after that terrible night. Jordan had to testify, had to sit in a courtroom and recount the worst period of their life, while Casey sat 20 feet away, medicated now and looking like a shadow of the person they'd been. The defense argued for psychiatric treatment rather than prison, painting Casey as a victim of their own brain chemistry, someone who needed help, not punishment. The prosecutor countered with Jordan's testimony, with the threatening messages, with the stalking photos, with the evidence of premeditation and escalation, with the trauma that Jordan and their entire family now carried, the way they flinched at doorbells, the way they checked over their shoulders constantly, the way a simple text notification could trigger a panic attack. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, they found Casey guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman with 30 years on the bench, delivered the sentence with clear disapproval of Casey's actions. "I've seen many cases of domestic violence in my courtroom," Judge Martinez said, "and I've seen the aftermath when victims don't get out in time." Mr. Jordan was fortunate to have a strong family support system and the courage to leave. You, Casey, are fortunate that no one died that night. Because make no mistake, that was your intent. Casey received 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5 if they completed psychiatric treatment and demonstrated sustained stability. It was a significant sentence, one that ensured Jordan would have years to heal and rebuild without fear of Casey appearing in their life. Jordan's victim impact statement, which they'd worked on for weeks with Dr. Chen, was read into the record. They'd debated whether to attend the sentencing in person or just submit in writing, ultimately deciding to be there, to look Casey in the eye one last time. "You told me once that I was your whole world," Jordan said, their voice steady despite the tears streaming down their face. "But love isn't supposed to destroy. It's supposed to build up. What you did wasn't love. It was possession. It was control. It was abuse. And it's taken me months to understand that none of it was my fault. I didn't cause your mental illness. I didn't provoke your violence. I simply existed as a separate person from you, and you couldn't handle that." They paused, looking directly at Casey, who was crying silently in their seat. "I hope you get help. Real help. I hope you learn what actual love looks like. But I also hope you understand the damage you caused. My family sleeps with weapons within reach now. I have PTSD. I can't date without panic attacks. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt everyone who cares about me. And that's a burden you'll carry for the rest of your life." When it was over, when Casey was led away to begin their sentence, Jordan felt something they hadn't felt in nearly a year: relief. Not happiness, not quite yet, but the bone-deep relief of knowing they were truly safe now, that the nightmare was finally, officially over. The healing process wasn't linear. There were good days and bad days. Days when Jordan felt strong and capable, and days when they couldn't get out of bed because the trauma felt too heavy. Their family was there through all of it, never judgmental, always supportive. Marcus taught them self-defense techniques, practical skills that helped them feel less vulnerable. David helped them find a new apartment in a secure building with a doorman, somewhere fresh that wasn't tainted by memories of Casey. Their father just listened whenever Jordan needed to talk, never offering platitudes or trying to rush their recovery. Marcus started dating again after a year, and he said something that stuck with Jordan. "I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was just living my life, getting healthier, figuring out who I was outside of that nightmare. And then I met someone, and it was so different from what I had with Casey. There was no rushing, no intensity, no need to know where they were every second. Just ease, compatibility, respect. And I realized that's what love is supposed to feel like." Jordan reconnected with friends they'd lost during the relationship with Casey. Most were understanding, grateful that Jordan had gotten out safely, willing to rebuild the connections that had been damaged. A few were more distant, hurt by how completely Jordan had disappeared on them, and Jordan had to accept that some bridges had been burned beyond repair. At work, Sandra continued to be a quiet source of support, never prying but always available if Jordan needed flexibility or just someone to talk to. She shared her own story one day, over coffee in her office, about an abusive ex she'd had in her 20s, the similarities making Jordan feel less alone. "The shame is the worst part," Sandra said, "feeling like you should have known better, should have seen the signs, should have left sooner. But you didn't have the information then that you have now. All you can do is move forward. with the wisdom you've gained. 2 years after that nightmarish night, Jordan attended a support group for survivors of intimate partner violence. They'd resisted going for a long time, feeling like their situation was unique, like others wouldn't understand. But Dr. Chen had gently encouraged them, suggesting it might help to connect with people who'd walked similar paths. Sitting in that circle of survivors, hearing stories that echoed their own experience in so many ways, Jordan realized something profound. They weren't alone. The details were different, but the patterns were the same. The love bombing, the isolation, the control, the escalation, the threats, the terror, and ultimately, the courage to leave and the long road of healing. One woman, Maria, shared about her ex who'd stalked her for 3 years after she left, how she'd had to move states and change her identity to finally feel safe. Another, James, talked about his ex-girlfriend who'd poisoned his food and then claimed it was an accident, how he'd nearly died before realizing what was happening. Their stories made Jordan's experience feel both validated and part of a larger, devastating pattern of how abuse operates. Jordan started volunteering with a domestic violence organization, helping staff the crisis hotline, offering the benefit of their experience to others who were trying to navigate leaving dangerous relationships. It was hard, triggering sometimes, but also deeply healing. Turning their pain into purpose, using their story to help others, gave meaning to everything they'd survived. 3 years after Casey's sentencing, Jordan attended a parole hearing. Casey's lawyer had argued that their client had made excellent progress in treatment, had expressed genuine remorse, and deserved a chance at supervised release. Jordan prepared a statement opposing parole, detailing the ongoing impact of Casey's actions, the ways they still struggled with trust and safety. In the end, the parole board denied early release, determining that Casey needed to complete the full recommended treatment program before being released into society. Jordan felt mixed emotions about it. Relief, certainly, but also sadness for the life Casey could have had if they'd gotten help earlier, if they'd made different choices, if mental illness hadn't twisted their capacity for love into something dangerous. Casey sent a letter to Jordan through their lawyer, not in violation of the no-contact order because it went through official channels, and Jordan had the option to refuse it. Jordan debated for weeks whether to read it, finally deciding that they were strong enough now to handle whatever it contained. The letter was surprisingly lucid, clearly written by someone who'd been in extensive therapy and was on stable medication. Casey apologized, not with excuses or justifications, but with plain acknowledgement of the damage they'd caused. They expressed understanding about why Jordan had to leave, why the parole had to be denied, why they would never be part of Jordan's life again. They said they were grateful Jordan had survived, had escaped, had found the strength to say no. "I understand now what I couldn't then," the letter read. "That loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even when what's best for them is to be far away from you. I hope you found peace. I hope you found real love, the kind that builds you up instead of tearing you down. You deserved so much better than what I gave you, and I'm sorry I couldn't be the person you thought I was." Jordan folded the letter and put it away, feeling a sense of closure they hadn't expected. Casey was getting help. Casey understood, at least intellectually, what had gone wrong. It didn't erase the trauma or make the past okay, but it was something. A recognition that people can change, can grow, can become better versions of themselves, even if it's too late to salvage what they destroyed. 4 years after escaping, Jordan went on a first date with someone new. They'd met through mutual friends, had taken months getting to know each other in group settings before Jordan felt comfortable going out one-on-one. The date was casual, coffee and a walk through the botanical gardens, and Jordan was hyper-aware of their trauma responses, the way they tensed when their date reached for their hand, the way they needed to know exact plans and timelines, the way they checked their phone constantly, a lingering habit from when Casey would panic if they didn't respond immediately. But their date, Alex, was patient, understanding. When Jordan explained they were taking things very slowly because of past trauma, Alex simply nodded and said, "We'll go at whatever pace feels right for you. No pressure. I'm just enjoying getting to know you." And that was it. No dramatic declarations of instant love, no intensity or possessiveness, just genuine interest in Jordan as a person, respect for their boundaries, and willingness to build something at a healthy pace. It felt foreign at first, after the whirlwind that had been Casey. But gradually, Jordan started to recognize it for what it was, what real love actually looks like. They'd been dating for 6 months, taking things slow, when Alex said something that made Jordan realize how far they'd come. They were cooking dinner together in Jordan's apartment, working side by side in comfortable silence, when Alex said, "I'm really happy, right here, right now, in this moment with you. I don't need anything more than this." Jordan stopped chopping vegetables and looked at Alex, this person who'd never once asked for their passwords, who'd never questioned their friendships, who'd never made them feel like they had to choose between their relationship and their family. This person who'd respected every boundary, who'd been patient with every trauma response, who'd celebrated every milestone of Jordan's healing. "I'm happy too," Jordan said, and realized with some surprise that it was completely true. They were happy, not in spite of what they'd survived, but maybe in some strange way because of it. Because surviving Casey had taught them what they deserved, what real love looked like, what red flags to never ignore again. 5 years after that terrible night when Casey had broken through the window, Jordan attended Casey's release hearing. The parole board had determined that Casey had completed their treatment program, had been medication compliant for years, and had a solid release plan involving supervised housing and continued psychiatric care. Jordan didn't oppose the release this time. Enough time had passed, enough healing had happened, that they felt secure enough in their own safety to allow Casey to move forward with their life too. They didn't attend in person, but submitted a statement emphasizing that the no-contact order needed to remain permanent and absolute. Jordan had moved on, was in a healthy relationship, had rebuilt their life, and needed Casey to respect that by staying completely out of their life forever. The parole board agreed, making permanent no contact a condition of Casey's release. 6 months after Casey's release, Jordan got married. Alex's proposal had been thoughtful and personal, nothing like Casey's early intensity, but somehow more meaningful because it came from a place of genuine partnership rather than obsessive need. The wedding was small, just family and close friends, held in the backyard of Jordan's childhood home. As Jordan stood there exchanging vows with Alex, surrounded by the family that had protected them, saved them, helped them heal, they thought about the journey they'd been on. The naive person who'd fallen for charm and intensity at that party years ago seemed like a different lifetime, a different person entirely. They'd been broken down, controlled, terrorized. But they'd also found strength they didn't know they had, learned the value of family and true friends, and ultimately built a life more authentic and fulfilling than anything they'd imagined. Marcus gave a toast at the reception, his voice gruff with emotion. "To my little sibling, who's been through hell and came out the other side stronger than steel. You taught us all what courage really looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. We're so damn proud of you." Later that night, as the celebration wound down and guests began to leave, Jordan found their father sitting alone on the porch, looking out at the street where police cars had once swarmed, where Casey had once threatened to destroy them all. "You okay, Dad?" Jordan asked, sitting down beside him. Their father smiled, pulling Jordan into a side hug. "I'm perfect. I'm watching my child start a new chapter with someone who genuinely deserves them. I'm thinking about how close we came to losing you, and how grateful I am that you had the courage to walk away when you did. I couldn't have done it without you all. You know that, right? If I hadn't had you to run to, Marcus and David to protect me, this house to be safe in, I don't know what would have happened. That's what family is for, their father said simply. We show up for each other, in the best times and the worst times, and we make damn sure that anyone who threatens one of us knows they're taking on all of us. Jordan leaned their head on their father's shoulder, feeling a peace they'd fought hard to achieve. The journey from victim to survivor to thriver had been long and painful, but they'd made it, and they'd made sure their story had a different ending than the one Casey had tried to write. So what do you think about this story? It's a stark reminder that love should never feel like captivity, that controlling behavior is never a sign of devotion, and that the courage to leave an abusive situation is one of the most powerful things a person can do. Red flags matter. Isolation is a warning sign. Intensity isn't passion. It's often possession. If you or someone you know is in a situation like Jordan's, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, and they're available 24/7. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve real love, not control disguised as care. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you seen these warning signs in a relationship, either your own or someone you know? What state are you watching from? And if this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because Jordan's story could save someone's life. The person you share it with might be trapped right now, might be making excuses for controlling behavior, might need this wake-up call to finally get out. Stay safe out there. Trust your instincts, and remember, leaving is always the right choice when someone makes you afraid of what they might do if you go.